Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. I am Jodi Truman, Financial Specialist for Child Nutrition. I also have been a school nutrition director and I'm bringing my experience to this webinar on budgeting today. Just a couple reminders that this is being recorded and it will be published sometime by next week. I'm guessing. I have also added in the chat a couple documents as well that I'll be talking about today. So you can look in the chat and open them, download them, print them. Okay, as we start looking at our budget, strategies for success. A budget does take time and effort to really look at the program from all angles and to dive in and answer how and why questions on where your program's money is going. A change of course can be needed just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it has to stay that way. We are here to feed students nutritious, healthy meals while maintaining a financially viable program. This is not always easy to do. Today, we'll be looking at the budget in three areas. The first is the program's future goals, then forecasting the revenue and expenses, and lastly, looking at program's break-even point. A few things to keep in mind. You are not alone. Pull your resources. The business office has budgeting experience and can give you the reports you need to build your budget. Managers and staff have firsthand experience with their students' eating habits and trends. They can also help you with equipment needs. A budget is a control document, a map for the current and future nutrition programs. A budget is also a public document and represents accountability in accordance with local, state, and federal laws. There are two different methods of budgeting, and we'll be using a combination of the two. Incremental budgeting is using last year's budget as your starting point, making adjustments to reflect the expected changes. The next is called zero-based budgeting. This is where you start at zero and build your budget line by line. Let's look at our future goals for the program. What am I going to do short term to keep the budget on track? A couple of examples I've listed here, and there are certainly a lot more, but looking at your revenue and expenses monthly and reviewing production records with meal counts to watch the trends. Establishing long-term goals is important too, as this is where you want to see your program grow. The pie in the sky goals. Nothing should be off the table. You never know when a grant comes along, and because you have already had a plan, you can act quickly to apply. I have listed a few. Maybe you want to move to scratch cooking, purchase a walk-in freezer, or build a new or update an old kitchen. You know that your production kitchen has an old dishwasher, and in 3 years, you will need to replace it. These are a few examples to help you start thinking about your program's goals. Forecasting expenses. The school food service department faced growing pressures to operate child nutrition programs with a high degree of efficiency, with budgetary considerations that vary from labor hours and food costs to equipment maintenance. Food service directors are often looking for ways to make their program more cost effective. Let's start with listing out expenses and breaking out the other category. This list comes right from your annual financial report or the annual financial worksheet that some of you are using. Next, decide how much money to allocate for each of the each of the categories by asking questions that impact program cost. And it is important that the other category, you try to capture every, your example, like I listed here, maintenance, staff training, dues and fees. You might have annual fees for your point of sale. Some of those may be the same every year. Some of them may be on a renewal plan. So you want to kind of map those out to keep track, because that may change from year to year. Cost effectiveness is a key component of all decisions related to labor, food purchasing, and equipment maintenance. These resources may help you calculate and maximize the cost effectiveness of operating the program. Food and non-food. Answer these questions. What type of food will you be serving, and how often? What is the serving model? What does your serving model include? What kind of packaging, transportation, and your handling cost? How will you separate the costs by program? And food purchasing, USDA foods, procurement method. Those are some of the things you want to be thinking about when you're looking at your food and non-food. And I just want to keep note here that I did combine food and non-food under this line, but in your annual financial report, the non-food is put in the other category. But looking at labor and benefits, how many staff do you have? How many hours will they work daily? How do labor contracts affect your program? And then equipment, your replacement time frame for large equipment, replacement of smallware, and additional smallware equipment needs. And then, of course, your other, which is mapping out for the year, your projected costs. So these are all questions that you need to be asking yourself. Do you need a grant to purchase the items? Is another question to ask yourself. Really think about each question listed and write your answers down to help you process your plan. Think about all the costs. You may need to make changes to your program based on your answers and goals moving forward. To start, let's look at the past year's annual financial reports. Put together an Excel spreadsheet. If you are using the annual financial worksheet, we provided the data for the overall picture in the last tab. If you didn't use a worksheet, you did complete the annual financial report in CMP Web and are able to see that data in past years. This is located in the Forms tab. I have clipped an example here of an Excel spreadsheet pulling past year's expenses, and this is in the chat that I put the Excel document that I used for this webinar, and my notes are in there as well. Next, we'll break out each category for the budget. When you break it down category, going deeper as seen above, the bottom clip is from CMP Web Annual Financial Report, and you can see where I entered that data from CMP Web into my spreadsheet. And this is an example from F23. I also added a column for plus minus between years to see the percentages of increase and decreasing for budgeting. When estimating for the following year, all forecasting that we talked about in the past slides will have an impact on your budget and help you determine your budget needs for the future and for the next year. Don't forget to break out your other category as well when estimating for the following year. In the budget spreadsheet, as seen above, estimate your expenses for each category. We are estimating for this year F25 in the spreadsheet above, but you're most likely budgeting for F26. The same process will take place. One thing to do is to track your meal counts. as the number of meals you serve directly affects your expenses and your revenue. I'll have a slide later on tips for saving money. Now we'll move on to the revenue. Based on the following factors listed, the amount of money available from local, state, and federal resources, your reimbursement rates, meal count history, and then your other revenue, interest, rebates, a la carte, catering, to name a few. These will all guide you in your revenue budget. Again, more questions. What is your reimbursement rate at the federal and state level for lunch and breakfast and your snack and milk? How will the rate change affect your reimbursement? Are you looking at provisions, CEP or provision 2? These are two of the best ways to maximize the use of federal dollars. Keep watching the Thursday update as David Hartley will be having a CEP session or webinar coming out soon. Any questions on special provisions should be directed to David Hartley. We also have PBR. USDA sets that additional rate and that doesn't always change from year to year. This year, the rate did increase to 9 cents. I have added a page in the chat for the federal and state reimbursement rates for your reference as well. Again, I talk about meal count history. When meal counts are also broken out by month, you can see trends that can help you forecast for the future. On the Child Nutrition website, under Child Nutrition Resources, and this is on the main page, is a link to the Child Nutrition Data Reports. This is where you can get your meal counts they're broken out by years. Other revenue, local subsidy, grants, interest, rebates, and a la carte all impact your revenue. If revenue is needed to cover expenses, you may want to look at increasing your a la carte items or look at ways to increase breakfast and lunch meals. We will talk more about this in the next future slides. You will continue with a spreadsheet for revenue, just like you did for expenses, pulling in previous year's revenue. Then you can enter your estimated revenue based on the revenue forecasting you have done. And that is in the last column. I've clipped both revenue and expenses of the spreadsheet to see the whole picture. I have also estimated my budget for F 2025 as seen above. If your program is not reaching the point at which revenue meets program costs and is losing money, steps should be taken to move your budget toward the break-even point. If your program has surplus of more than 3 months of the program's expenses, then maybe you need to look at ways to use the extra money to improve your program goals. And I will note here that if you do have over that, you will be getting a letter from David Hartley on a plan to use that money. Each month, you should be watching your budget to make sure you are on track. This last spreadsheet is showing your actual completed final budget numbers for F24, then your estimated F25 budget. Then the last column is your year-to-date column and expenses tallied monthly. And I'm sorry, the last column shows your percent of the budget you have used year-to-date. You can also see that I added ending inventory, something that the annual financial report doesn't ask, but I have included it as it is an important part of your budget for next year as well. Next, we're going to talk about some tips for reducing your expenses. Decreasing labor costs and food costs, menu planning, some suggestions. Are you using cycle menus to meet the nutritious needs while balancing food costs. Consider the cost of items. Scratch cooking may be less expensive. Plan menus using seasonal produce. Balance cost in combining high cost foods with lower cost foods. Those are just a few. Purchasing, are you using USDA foods? Are you using local foods fund, the federal food fund? Are you using NOI and rebates? Those are all ways to reduce your food costs. Are you involved in a buying group where you can get a better deal as a group? Your inventory, are you taking an inventory and using what you have on hand? That's a big key to your budget and saving money. And next week, Michelle has a webinar on inventory. I'm sorry, in 2 weeks, not next week, in 2 weeks. So if you haven't signed up, I encourage you to sign up for that. Preparation, following standard recipes, using all edible portions. Train your staff to reduce unnecessary waste. Incorporate leftovers in other menus. And then there's grab and go meals. Serving, monitor portion controls, compare production records to meals served. Food storage practices for leftovers. Are your staff taking extra items home? They shouldn't be. You can be using those leftovers for the next day. For the next day and making new meals with those. Leftovers do belong to the program and should not be taken home by staff. Tips for increasing revenue. Menu planning. Offer a variety of foods that students like. Conduct taste tests. Grab and go meals. Are you offering meals for field trips? Extra sales. A la carte sales is a big one for bringing in extra money to your program. Serving lines, how long are your lines? Do you need to add additional lines at other locations with mobile carts? Utilize your space, create food stations, think outside the box. Serving times are another ways to increase revenue. By staggering your meal times to expand maybe even breakfast or lunch, or making sure kids are the first group coming in to your cafeteria to getting a meal. By staggering, you have that class getting their meals and sitting down when the next class is then coming in. So they're not waiting a long time to get their meals and then only being able to eat 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the lunchtime. Maybe serving meals during breaks or between classes. Offer meals to late arrivals. Those are all different ways to help increase your revenue. And then, of course, which we already talked about, is catering. Are you catering your school functions? Send it out to all your admin and your staff. Be that person if they're having teachers meetings or special functions, that they call you for that food instead of going down the street to a bakery or a sub shop. Come up with your own menu that you can hand out to people. Different things like that. All revenue is for the nonprofit school food service account as required by the program regulations. When setting prices, include labor and use standard food prices. You cannot use the cost of your USDA foods or your NOI food. You must use the price that you would pay as those USDA foods. Getting those prices are for the students to lower your food costs there. So these are just some tips that can help you start thinking of ways to help increase and reduce your budget. I know I've covered quite a bit in this presentation. I encourage you to look through the Excel sheet that I have in the chat and also the rates. I am also going to be having open office hours for any questions on budgeting that you may have. Those dates will be coming out in next Thursday's webinar.
Thursday's update.
I mean, Thursday's update. Sorry about that. I have a webinar on my mind. I can always be available as well by phone or email, cell phone. And that's what I have. Paula, do we have any questions?
Not at the moment.
Great. So obviously 2 participants raised hands. You have raised hands?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, we're not sure how if you just put your question in the chat, Martha Pollock raised her hand. I don't know. Can you unmute yourself, Paula? Martha, I'm sorry. And ask your question. We're going to try to help you with that if we can do that. And she's probably going to say something about using the resources for local foods. Hopefully you're going to share a little bit about that. I'm wondering, Martha.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. If I raised my hand, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh.
And I don't have a question, but I do appreciate that you mentioned including local food funds, which could be up to $5,500, and the LFS funds, yet to be determined in the next round how much school districts will get, but including that in their revenue that will offset some of their food expenses.
Exactly. And that's we've given out a lot of money this year for local foods for the LFS fund, and this should have helped, many on that budget line of food. And Martha, you also have, I didn't know if you wanted to share a little bit about your the coordinators that might be going around with local foods to different schools. If you mind, why not? Since you're on the line.
All right, thank you. And any background noise you hear is I'm sitting at the Maine Ag Trade Show in Augusta at the moment. So there's a little, buzz in the background. So this project that Katie Knowles is overseeing, a big USDA grant that is funding a project, the Regional Local Foods Project, that has, we've got coordinators in 4 regions this year, and next year it will be all 9 superintendent regions. The coordinators are here to help school districts implement Harvest of the Month programs, access fishermen feeding Mainers, get a better understanding and make good use of their local food funds and the local foods for school federal funds. We're helping to connect schools with farmers and producers to bring in more local foods. So that's kind of the nature of the project. And in the 4 districts that we do have, 4 regions, we have coordinators. That's Aroostook County down east, which is Hancock and Washington County. The Western region, which is Androscoggin, Oxford, and Franklin counties, and then York County, the York region. We've already been, those coordinators have been reaching out to schools, nutrition directors to get in contact, find out what kind of help and assistance they would like with all of these farm and sea to school programs that DOE Child Nutrition sponsors and wants to promote. So those folks are out there, and Katie Knowles certainly can put all those folks in direct contact with directors who have not necessarily heard from their coordinators.
Yes, that is awesome. Thank you. That's a great program. So happy that is happening out there. And I know they've been doing some taste tests as well at different schools, which can help your program as well, increase your meal counts and get kids eating healthy foods.
Indeed.
Thank you, Martha.
Welcome.
So Jodi, the chat is not working.
Oh, the chat is not working.
So when I send out certificates, I'll send the link to
okay.
the documents that you put in there.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We tried to do it another way and that didn't work either. So, so when you get your certificate, Paula will send that Excel spreadsheet and the rate table, the rates, and that does include the Maine rate as well listed in there. That can help.
That'll be next week. I have a project to finish up before I get the certificates out.
Yes. So the other thing too is in my webinar, when I have my open office hours, if you didn't get those 2 sheets, I can give them to you then, or you can always email me in the meantime, ask me to send them to you that way as well. So one way we will make sure you get them, and no sense in reinventing the wheel where I already started something for you. And also you can kind of use the worksheet, your financial worksheet that you're using now, create another tab in that and kind of put this information there so it's all in one place. So those are some of my suggestions, and I'm sure there's other ways out there as well. I tried to make it simplify it a little bit, so it's something that can be successful. And I think that is it. Again, thank you for joining me today. Thank you, Martha, for raising your hand and and adding to the webinar today. Have a great time at the Ag Show. All right, thank you, and have a wonderful day, everybody.